Today, carbon dioxide is something we hear more and more about. When we were kids, it was just a phrase used in a biology lesson. But now, words like man-made and naturally occurring are bandied about in the press. I want to find out what these words mean, what carbon dioxide is all about, what it does for us, and what we are doing to increase its levels.
Naturally occurring carbon dioxide comes from the breath of us and other animals, from forest fires and from volcanoes.
In the upper atmosphere, it acts as a blanket. It traps some of the sun's heat and regulates our temperature. And it's because of this temperature regulation that we've been able to thrive and survive as a species for thousands of years. Like any blanket, it has to be the right thickness to work effectively. Now, some scientists believe that because carbon dioxide occurs naturally, that it doesn't matter what thickness the blanket is. But the overwhelming majority of scientists believe that there is a problem and we need to act as soon as we can. So how do we produce carbon dioxide? Well, everything we do in our modern society uses carbon dioxide. Take exercise, for example. The more we exercise, the more we need to replace that energy with food. And as you'll see in this documentary, even extra food can add masses of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. The food you eat every day is packed full of pollution. In the 1960s, 1 calorie of energy produced over 2,000 calories of food. But today, because of modern farming methods, 2,000 calories of energy produces just 1 calorie of food. The average family of 4 emits over 8 tons of carbon dioxide through the food they eat. That's the equivalent to 22 kilos of carbon dioxide per day, which is far more than the weight of the food itself.
The average individual can emit over 2 tons of carbon dioxide just through the food choices they make. That's the equivalent weight of 2 BMW Minis during 1 year.
Even though we've had massive advances in motoring technology, the average Ford today is less fuel efficient than Henry Ford's original Model T of over 100 years. The average sports utility vehicle, or 4x4, will produce over 5 tons of carbon dioxide a year just through an average annual mileage. That's the equivalent weight of over 5 BMW Minis.
Travelling by aeroplane is as energy efficient as travelling in a small car. The problems with aviation are twofold. Firstly, because of the speed and distance of a plane journey, they allow passengers to burn huge amounts of fossil fuels very quickly. For example, every passenger on a plane emits over 100 kilograms of carbon dioxide every hour.
Secondly, and more importantly, aviation is 3 times as bad for the environment as any other form of pollution. So for every hour in a plane, it's the equivalent of 300 kilos, or a third of a ton, of carbon dioxide emitted at ground level.
A return shopping trip to New York will emit the equivalent of over 2 tons of carbon dioxide. A return journey to Sydney, Australia, over 6 tons.
Aviation is the fastest growing source of carbon dioxide. It's as bad for the planet as driving a sports utility vehicle or a 4x4. But the difference is, in a plane, you are able to do hundreds of kilometers per hour. It's the cheapest and easiest form of adding to global warming there is. arguments we use in the West against not cutting back our levels of pollution is the staggering growth of the economies of China and India and their associated levels of pollution.
But these countries haven't just found huge natural resources. They haven't just invented world-beating products. The reason they are so successful is quite simply because they are cheap. And we make our products in their factories because it saves us money and gives us cheaper products, whatever the cost to the environment.
So, instead of having our products made in clean European factories, we choose to have them made in dirty factories in China and India with no regulation. China is creating a new coal-fired power station every single week, and the reason for this is quite simply to keep up with the demand from the West. Every time a UK company sources products from the Far East, they're simply exporting the pollution abroad.
So when we point the finger at countries like China and India for their levels of pollution, consider this: we simply wouldn't allow the factories that make our products in China to operate in our own backyard.
If it's on the other side of the world, we don't seem to care. For every kilowatt of electricity produced in a power station, only 1/3 reaches us. 2/3 of the electricity is lost in transmission. So because of our centralised electricity distribution system, our energy is 3 times dirtier than it needs to be. If you insulate your home well, you can save up to a tonne of carbon dioxide in a year. The average broadleaf tree holds about 7/10 of a tonne of carbon dioxide, and it takes 100 years to absorb that much. The average UK resident would need to plant 1,000 trees during their lifetime to absorb the carbon dioxide that they release into the atmosphere through their activities. But in order to leave the planet carbon dioxide debt-free, all the trees should be planted at our birth, because as we grow older, richer, we pollute more, then the trees grow bigger, stronger, and are able to take more of the carbon dioxide that we release into the atmosphere. Some of the problems associated with using trees as a carbon sink is that they're not very efficient. Trees burn and decay, and they release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. And the second bigger problem is that if you plant 1,000 trees for every individual on this planet, there simply won't be enough room for the people themselves. Unfortunately, the pollute now, whack a few saplings in the ground strategy may well be doomed to failure, as a warmer planet may well reduce the effectiveness of trees as a carbon sink. Carbon trading is a neat idea. Pollute the planet and contribute towards clean renewable energy. Sounds like the solution, doesn't it? The problem is, it doesn't replace dirty energy, it simply adds new energy. And we all know the more energy we have access to, the more gizmos and gadgets we buy to use up the energy. So, carbon trading would work if the new clean source of energy replaced a dirty power station, but it rarely does. In effect, carbon trading does very little to remove any carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The best it does is mitigate future pollution.